Good morning. Thank you all for coming on this cold morning. I'm proud to be standing here with two of my colleagues in the Assembly, Assemblyman Felix Ortiz from Brooklyn, who among other chairmanships also heads up the Puerto Rican Hispanic Task Force in the Assembly, of which I am a proud member. And to my left is Assemblyman Joe Borelli from Staten Island, who has his own story to tell, and I'm proud that we now have over 80 sponsors in the Assembly of our Adoptee Bill of Rights. I introduced Assembly Bill A909 a number of years ago. Senator Lanza from Staten Island has the bill in the Senate as Senate 2490. And it would allow adult adoptees, when they become 18 years of age, access to their original birth certificate, and along with that, the family medical information. Any non-adopted person has a legal right to obtain this information, and we're simply asking for equality, that adoptees who are citizens of New York State should have the same rights as any other non-adoptee to have access to their original birth certificate. For years, adoptees throughout the state have struggled to obtain basic birth information and family medical records guaranteed to the rest of us. As several diseases and preventative care treatments are linked to family history and genetics, it is imperative that adoptees are able to receive access to their hereditary history so that medical professionals are given all of the necessary information to cure life-threatening illnesses. And we'll hear a personal story from one of our advocates of how that information may have saved her son's life. One of the mothers who has advocated for passage of this bill gave her son up for adoption, and years later hired a private investigator, as I mentioned, and tracked down her son who had a medical history of congenital heart defects. And this information may have saved Jill's son's life. The pages are getting frozen. Again, we're simply asking for equality for adoptees, that adoptees should not be treated any less than any other citizen. Years ago, when these medical records, these adoptee records were sealed at adoption and kept by the Department of Health, there was a certain stigma attached a number of years ago for giving up a child for adoption. This is no longer the case. And by the way, our bill also prevents discrimination against poor people, because anyone who has assets, has substantial amounts of money, and does want to find out their original birth certificate, their original birth parents, can hire a private investigator and ultimately find them. But other adoptees that do not have the financial means are discriminated against, and they do not have the ability to hire a private detective and to find their birth parents on the original birth certificate. I'm now going to call upon my colleague from Brooklyn, Assemblyman Felix Ortiz.
Well, thank you. Let me just, and good morning, let me just thank Senator Lanza and Assemblyman Weprin for taking the initiative to fight the good fight about a human rights and injustice issue. I think this issue is very critical, very important. I was mentioned before that I have two pair of cousins that are twins, and they was adopted. And right now we don't know who they are, and this is a mechanism that will help not only the family who adopting the child, but the family who adopting the child to know exactly whether or not, what kind of medical condition, as I mentioned before, which is very critical. You know, we have a lot of epidemics and issues, diabetes, for example, we have cardiovascular problem, we have kidney problem, and so on, and cancer problems. So this will help to ensure that the family who adopt an individual, or that child, that family can have, that adoptee can have the history, medical record, medical history of that. So we cannot deprive, the Department of Health could not deprive this individual from having those records. And I commend both sponsors, and I also would like to commend Assemblyman Borelli from being here with us, and all the advocates who continuously are putting the fight because without you, we won't be able to get this done. I think you present here in the cold weather, we're going to make a hat to make sure that this bill gets the light in the assembly.
Right, and actually for the first time, we're going to have a hearing of the New York State Assembly Health Committee this coming Friday at 10 a.m. across the street at 250 Broadway. And I think we're going to get some momentum early on in the session when we have the transcript of the testimony of so many different advocates who have had hardship cases trying to find their original birth certificate. Assemblyman Joe Borelli from Staten Island.
I want to begin by saying thank you to David for sponsoring this bill. This particular issue is very important to me as an adoptee, and I want to begin by saying that this is an injustice, not only to the adoptees themselves, but as David pointed out, to the mothers who were falsely told that this information would even be kept secret. I have never met, in my 10 years of being involved with adoptee issues, I've never met someone who has hired a private investigator and was unable to find information about their parents. I want to share a little bit of my story. Last year when we had this press conference, I talked about my medical conditions. I have absolutely no idea what medical conditions I have, except for male pattern baldness, which I'm just now discovering. My whole medical life is trusting the comments made by a scared 16-year-old girl who was scared when she gave me up for adoption. She remembered that her grandmother died of a brain tumor and that her father, or her grandfather rather, my grandfather had kidney problems. This is when she was 16 years old. We don't know what happened to her in terms of her health for the rest of her life. We don't know what happened to the rest of my paternal and maternal ancestors. Another thing happened to me this year, which I thought was quite interesting, and it's kind of therapeutic. My original record said that I was half Italian and half Irish. For 15 years of my life, my parents shared with me the records when I was 16 years old. So for about 15 years of my life, I went around this earth thinking that I was an Italian-Irish person. And this may not sound insignificant, it may not sound significant to people, but that's part of your identity. You are where you come from. You are who you believe you are. I was proud of being Irish. I would go to the St. Patrick's Day Parade, to Irish events. I was proud of that. Through a friend with Unsealed Initiative, he had got me involved in some of the genetic DNA testing. Well, it turns out I'm not Irish. And for 15 years, I falsely believed I was something I'm not. I can laugh about it now, but there is some type of shame involved in that. I had spent my life telling people I was something, and now to tell them or having to explain to them that I'm not, it's just very sad. We have to stop things like this. Who knows why my biological mother, when she was 16, told the adoption agency that my father was Irish? We have no idea. We'll never know. But that's what she did, and this is the document I've been basing so much of my life on. It's time for people like me, for fellow adoptees, to have access to their records. It is an injustice. It is setting up a two-class system between those who can have access and those who can't. So I commend David for sponsoring the bill, and I commend everyone here standing behind me. Thank you.
My name is Jill Auerbach. I'm a birth mom. I relinquished my son when he was first born. I never got to see him, to hold him, and know whether he had 10 fingers and 10 toes. Yet I never ever forgot about him, and I always worried whether he was healthy and loved and whether he had a good life or not. I felt like I deserted this infant of mine, never knowing what happened to him, and I had no choice in the matter. There were no choices then. Our children were taken away from us. So years later, his father dropped dead. His biological father dropped dead of a massive heart attack. His father's father likewise had dropped dead of a massive heart attack. His father was only 41 years old at the time. His half-sister had a heart attack at age 41. His father's mother's family all had heart disease. So when he was approaching the age of 40, I realized that this son of mine out there somewhere had no idea that he had a potential ticking time bomb in his body. And my husband and I searched for him. And luckily we did find him. And I can tell you, all the shame of over 40 years, all of a sudden when I spoke with him, and I just had the weight of the world lifted off of my shoulders, and I feel like I can finally die in peace. And I probably did save his life. He did go to the doctor, and just some simple things to correct the problem that probably caused his father to drop dead have probably saved his life. My second husband had just had some brain aneurysms, apparently runs in his family. Well, we were told that all of our children have to have be checked for that to save their lives. So you can see that this is an important part. But the most important thing is that this is a human rights issue, not just for adoptees, but for birth moms. Most of us want to know what happened to our children. It is a blessing to know. Secrets are harmful. And the first night I spoke with my son, I addressed the fact that I was concerned that how he would feel about his parents. Would he feel disloyal? And he said to me, I think they're looking down from heaven and smiling. And that's the way it should be. We're a family now, all of us. His father's family, his biological father's family, his adoptive family, and our family. And that's how it should be. Secrets hurt, and the truth is healing. Thank you.
My name is Larry Dell, and I found out that I was adopted late in life. I'm a late discovery adoptee. And when I found out, I was very shocked. But then as I looked into it a little further, and I discovered that the state of New York holds my original birth certificate, and because of that, I can't find out who my original birth parents or my relatives or siblings were. I was totally stunned. And, I spoke to a number of people, and, I said, what country am I living in where this basic human information about me is withheld from me? And as I further, looked into the whole situation, got involved with the adoptee rights movement, I discovered that, there were certain objections that people had, and I don't want to go into the motivation for those people who have, restricted the rights of adoptees, whether or not they're politicians or religious leaders, because some of them are coming around to see the issue in what I think is the right way. But all of those, objections that the opponents have proven to be false or have proven to be wrong, because we now have information, we have data in all the states where the rights have been changed, where the rules and the laws have been changed, and they prove beyond a doubt that all of the objections raised by the opponents don't come true. Some of the objections were that adoptions would be reduced and abortions would increase. None of that happened in all the states where the laws have been changed. So there really are no reasons why this law should remain on the books. And I really, congratulate the assemblymen here today with us for their efforts to change the law, because it's long past due, and we need, I need the law changed, rather quickly. I would like to find out, and my children would like to find out, who their original birth parents and relatives and siblings are.
My name is Rod Shinners, and I'm a not frequently found type here. I'm a birth father. In 1965, my girlfriend, for several years, gave birth to a child, and due to family pressures and social stigma, she did not want to get married. I buried it for a long time in my head, and then I couldn't take it anymore. It came back to haunt me, so to speak. And that's when I found out, when I started to look, I found out about these restrictions and the fact that adoptees are considered less than the rest of us. Now, I have 4 other sons by my marriage. I'm just as much their father as I am the father of that first child. And I take a responsibility for that. I'm looking, if I find that, that's my son also. And I have no intention of giving up. I feel that this is just totally wrong. There's no reason why any of us should be treated any differently than anybody else. And people hear that this man's a citizen just as much as everybody else. You can't find out. It's the law. You can get your legs blown off in Iraq, and if you're an adoptee, you can't get your birth certificate. If you're a prisoner in Sing Sing doing life, you can get yours if you weren't adopted. So this doesn't make any sense to me, and nobody should be any less than somebody else by virtue of the fact of which they had no control. So I am very happy David Weprin and all our other staunch supporters have labored for so many years and against a lot of opposition. I have to give them a lot of credit, because if it wasn't for them, this wouldn't be going anyplace. Frankly.
My name is Pete Franklin. I'm frozen, but I made a trek from New Jersey. I was fortunate that I was adopted in England, where since 1975 adopted people could go get their birth certificate. And I went and got mine. It's a piece of paper. It's got my mother's name on it. It says she's a nurse. Now I know that I am Irish. and I like St. Paddy's Day too, Assemblyman. But I really know it in my heart. And it feels good to know that. And just having this piece of paper, if I date someone with the last name Woods, I ask them a few more questions. There's documented cases of incest, because we don't know who we're related to. And it's absolutely ridiculous. We're driving in from New Jersey. I was looking at the Freedom Tower and thinking about the birth mother who looked for her son, who died in the World Trade Center attack. And that's a horrible injustice, and it's so sad. These sealed records are cruelty to women. When women were treated like dirt in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, now they want to come out of the closet and say, I would have kept my child, but no one helped me. Today they do keep their children because they have an education, because they have jobs, and they tell the men in their life, no, I'm going to keep my child. But they didn't have that option back then. So I think we have to remember that before you find a pool of adoptable babies, you're going to find the rights of women crushed. And you can look to China for that today. Now, I started an organization that I call AWOL, Adoptees Without Liberty. I advocate for soldiers who are adopted. And by God, if you can trust us downrange with weapons, you can trust us with our birth certificates. This issue cuts both party lines. If you think it's a civil rights issue and that's all the Democrats care about, well, okay, it is. If you think Republicans can grasp onto this, there is a conservative case to open records. Wanting to know your biological family is pro-family. And we want to do that. We want to hold both of our families in our arms, and we can do that. And we want the government out of our lives. If that's a Republican cause, we don't want the government trying to facilitate the relationships of adults. We can handle that on our own. The last thing I'd like to say, I want to thank these assemblymen for coming out here in the cold and standing up for people that don't have rights, especially Assemblyman Borelli. Now, women may not have gotten a lot of rights until a woman got elected. Black people may not have gotten a lot of rights until they got elected, but an adopted person got elected. Now, your friends, your colleagues have to look you in the eye and say they know better, sir. You can't have this. And I want to thank you guys for standing up for that, because it's absolutely ridiculous. So thank you for getting in there and standing up for us.
Thank you. And I want to point out, as a follow-up to his statement, is that this legislation has bipartisan support. It's got Republicans as well as Democrats. And I want to make sure everybody comes if they can. I know Jill said she had a conflict, but if you come to the hearing this Friday at 10 o'clock across the street at 250 Broadway in the Assembly hearing room, and if you can't make it, if you could submit testimony, and Celia will make arrangements to get the testimony in. So I think it's very important, because once we get the transcript, because I think you're going to see, we have people from other states, we have some national experts coming, and I think the amount of people supporting this legislation will overwhelm, stating publicly, the silent people that are coming out whispering but not really making any valid cases. So I think the hearing will clear that up, and hopefully we'll go into the legislative session with a little momentum. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
I don't really understand, since we live in a democracy and we have more than half of the assembly members not only in agreement but totally signed on to our bill, how just a few powerful people have the right to block it in New York State in the Assembly. Can you answer that?
I wish I could. I can't answer it because I think it speaks for itself, and I think we just have to keep the momentum up. You may know there was something called paid sick leave in New York City, which was bottled up for years and years, even though there was a majority of the city council supporting it. that has changed, and I know under Mayor de Blasio it's even going to expand. So we'll take one step at a time.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming in this cold.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Thank you.